The Magical Grandmother, Druid Heir Prequel Short Story, copyright NZ Nasser, published by Honora Sky Press, all rights reserved. Every grandmother thinks their grandchild is special, but they are almost always mistaken. They see a little ray of sunshine where there is a serial tantrumer, a drooling mess, an all-night wailer, or an ankle biter. I've never had a high maternal drive. The village elders back home in India used to tut over my aging womb, telling me that I should give my husband many sons, not just one. Joshi remained an only child, despite their criticism. I've always known who I am and how to resist. I value truth even when it's painful. So believe me when I say, my granddaughter, Alicia, will change the world. I don't hold such high hopes for her brother, but that's not the sort of thing a grandmother says out loud, especially not when I've agreed to babysit the little urchins while their parents have some time to themselves. I plastered a smile on my face as my son Joshi, now 31 years old, and his wife Rosalie fussed over the children. The family home in South London, with its 3 stories, art studio and koi pond, was mine, but I felt a stranger here these days. I mostly lived at the Celestial Library anyway, a marvel that existed between the folds of reality and was my responsibility to protect. It was a privilege rather than a burden. The library housed the most powerful books and artefacts in the other world. It wasn't the only moving library in the world, but it was the most unique and ever-changing with a mind of its own. Sometimes I could feel its very thoughts. "I don't know, Ma. Are you sure?" said Joshi. I sighed. "Of course, you don't need to worry about us." The children clutched their parents' legs as if they knew I'd rather be in my library amongst the stars than here with them. The little one, Alicia, had only just turned 1 and could barely walk. She wobbled, fat thighs poking out of her summer dress. The gloopy remnants of a cucumber stick poked out from her chubby fist. I reached for her. They were so wriggly at this age. "Come here." Alicia recoiled from me and fell. "Maman." "I don't know, Rajika," said Rosalie, extricating 3-year-old Sahil from the folds of her skirt with difficulty. "Maybe Joshi and I should just stay home. You don't know the children's routine and they might pine for us. I'm sure you have to get back to your work." A Frenchwoman, Rosalie thought it was appropriate to call me by my first name and refused to call me Mum, even though I gave their marriage my blessing and tried to be nice. An Indian daughter-in-law would have offered me freshly brewed chai at the moment I walked in the door, not a pastry with a drizzle of tin custard on top. "Don't be silly, I'll figure it out." I shooed them out the door. "You booked the tickets months ago. It might be an age before Duran come to London again. Just because it's been a long time since I've bounced a baby or mopped up spilt milk doesn't mean I'm not capable." I swallowed a sudden burst of homesickness. The English seemed only to sing at concerts or in drunken groups falling out of pubs. In India, people sang all day. "It's not that. It's just that you're here to babysit the children wearing armour." Rosalie looked at the mix of worn leathers and metal plating suspiciously. I didn't take their criticism to heart. Instead, I leapt in my chainmail dress and beat out a musical rhythm on my breastplate that made the children giggle. I wasn't an ordinary grandmother. I'd always known I didn't fit in. At school in India, my bowling during cricket games left the boys crying tears into the dirt. There was no turning back once my magical powers developed. It was not every day that a 5'3" woman's talents left grown men quaking. India's magical community had revered and feared my brother and me. From Rajiv's paintings, I brought to life wise elephants, soaring vultures, and pods of whales. So you see, I'd always known I wasn't meant to be a homemaker or a reader of bedtime stories or someone well versed with what temperature to wash silks or how to plump pillows or make a bed neatly. I came straight from a battle, Rosalie, I said. The dark elves have been a pain recently. To be honest, I don't think we've seen the last of them. My son shot me a warning look. Best not to talk about that, or I'll never get Rosalie out of here. Rosalie was a humdrum, and non-magical. Joshy had told her all about the other world, against my advice. After a son marries, a mother loses him. She only retains pieces of his attention. He saves most of it for his wife. To be honest, Rosalie was better at looking after him than I was. She was welcome to his crisis of faith about his art. If I can ride Nightfall swinging a sword in this, I'll be able to change nappies too, I assured them. Rosalie winced. I could call our neighbour Alma. She could give you a hand. Ma's got it covered. Come on, darling, we'll be late. Joshy strong-armed his wife out of the door. Take off those spiked boots, will you, Ma, before they poke someone's eyes out. And no magic in front of the children. Promise me. I thought of the joy of the children if I had brought animals to life in front of their eyes. Maybe the two of us together, me and my son. But every time I broached the subject, he said that they had humdrum books. They didn't need any more. As if Mog the Cat or Tintin could compare with the wonders we could show Sahil and Alicia. Without magic, Joshy withheld a life of colour and meaning from his children. India thrummed with magic. Even the rains there were magical. I'd not had a choice when I'd come to the grey concrete metropolis of London. When a goddess asks for your help, you don't say no, however hard it is to leave home behind. I told myself that as long as we had our magic, everything would be okay. But my son had other ideas, even though I needed him. He'd been my illustrator since my estrangement from my brother. But Joshy had been drifting away from magic since we'd set foot in this cold land. He'd not said it out loud, but his every action since his marriage spoke of his turning away from magic. I carried that pain with me every day, but I kept it locked up. An adult had to make their own decisions, even if they were wrong. I looked him straight in the eye, sadness blooming in me like a rose. No magic, of course. The lie shriveled on my lips. I scrambled to change the topic, darting a look at his paint-stained fingers. Have you been able to draw the series of snakes for me yet? Joshy's brow furrowed under his mop of wild hair, so like his father's. I've been busy with work. I sighed. The Christmas greeting card range? Joshy flushed. Yes, Ma. I do have a family to feed, you know. I remembered the struggle of getting onto a firm financial footing as a young family. You can work with me in the Celestial Library. You'll want for nothing, and we can work side by side. That's not what I went to art school for. You have to let me find my own way. And with Rosalie starting her new job at Evolve Tech, I need to be around more. I can't hide away amongst the stars like you. He softened. I don't mean to sound angry. I'll get around to the snake paintings, okay? We'd better go. He ruffled his children's hair. Be good, you two. Rosalie clung to the children like she would be gone for days, not an evening. Go and enjoy yourselves. I bent to hold the children's hands, but the little traitors squirmed. I tutted, then released them and closed the front door. The children stared at me with eyes as large as saucers before Sahil pushed his sister over, toppling her as easily as a bowling pin. Honking laughter sounded behind me. I can't wait to see how the great Rajika Verma, Custodian of the Celestial Library, animator extraordinaire and seasoned warrior, deals with these two monsters, said Echo, my leopard familiar, whose ancestors had sworn to protect the Verma family line. His lustrous golden coat caught the evening light, and his emerald eyes sparkled with mirth. We'd fought 100 battles side by side, and not one scar marred his beautiful body. "Finished terrorizing the koi in the pond, have you?" I asked. Echo grinned, revealing his jagged tombstone teeth. "A precursor to the royal deer in Richmond Park tonight." "No hunting for you tonight. There have been one too many missing pet posters around here, and besides, I need you to play nanny alongside me." I bundled the baby onto my hip, but she squirmed against my armour, so I held her aloft like a trophy instead. Echo nudged my grandson along in the direction of the living room. "I've missed you. You've been spending too much time amongst the stars. You should take me with you." I set the baby down in the corner on the sofa, but she sprang forward into a nosedive. I caught her by her chubby thigh. She obviously had a death wish. She'd have to sit on the floor. The baby scurried out of my grasp. I turned my attention back to Echo. "A library is no place for a leopard." His emerald eyes flashed with envy. "Fine for the prancing winged horse, though." "Nightfall is a product of imagination. His purpose is tied to the celestial library." I curled my hand into the depth and warmth of his golden fur. "He has nothing of your wildness, your drive for prey." The leopard's eyes narrowed. "I presume you don't complain about his bodily functions defecating up in the celestial space." "Let's just enjoy this time together, okay?" I said. His tail swished. "As long as we can show the children some magic, it's only right we make up for Joshy's failings." I laughed. "I completely agree. This is the perfect opportunity to show them something they'll never forget." Echo's love for me was all-encompassing. Even when I told him to stay in his ancestral home of India when I'd made the journey to England, part of me had known he would follow. I loved him for it, but I mourned how our only option for his arrival was for a witch to create a glamour for him. Now, those without true sight didn't see him as a leopard. They saw a Bengal cat instead. Not my grandchildren, though. At least, not yet. For now, my grandchildren saw Echo as his true self, which would be a problem once they went to school. Children tended to be loose-lipped and honest, and insisting they had a leopard at home would mean trouble unless they learnt to omit the truth or obscure it. Magical lives could never be entirely honest. They were about secrets and lies, who had the most power and where it was concentrated. I didn't often pray, but when I did, I prayed my son would never choose to bind my children's powers. I prayed they would know the utter joy and power of their magical selves. Could a person ever truly find a place to belong in the world if their talents were stolen from them? The children had already had their dinner, and the clock told me I had half an hour to entertain them until bedtime. That I could manage. It was time for a magic show they wouldn't forget. I delved into my rucksack, a Beatles one courtesy of the Celestial Library, for my catalogue of creatures and flicked through the pages. My skills had grown with age. Once I had only been able to bring to life the ants and stick insects drawn by my brother, but in my 20s, with practice, it had been small birds or frogs, and then rodents and dogs, and eventually I could animate creatures both large and small, from hippos to giraffes, deer to panthers. Each animal tied to a purpose I assigned to it. Each animal beholden to me unless I released it. Each animal drawn by either my illustrator brother or my son. My armour clanked as I sat cross-legged on the carpeted floor and flicked through my catalogue of creatures. A few moments passed before I landed on the perfect page. I smoothed it out, revelling in my power with the glee of a rebellious schoolgirl, although I was 53 years of age. A whole array of birds stared back at me, painted by my son. It was within my power to animate any creature, but it would have been silly of me to bring a hippopotamus to life in a suburban living room. The first thing an animator learned was to have respect for the creatures because things could go horribly wrong. Once born, the creatures could wreak havoc in the wrong environment, and most creatures were dangerous in some way when cornered or afraid. Birds were a good choice, particularly British garden variety birds, which wouldn't suffer once I freed them and could slot into the native ecosystem. Birds were resourceful, independent little things, able to migrate and build new homes out of the reach of grasping human hands. To some, they might seem ordinary, but they could swoop and sing and had such diversity of form and feathers. But there was another reason I chose birds. I chose them for Alicia. My little granddaughter didn't care for insects, snails, or neighbourhood dogs, but she'd been captivated by birds in the garden, even as a babe in arms. A glimpse of one had always soothed her fussing, even in the colicky first few months of her life. Flocks of seagulls in Brighton made her squeal with delight, particularly if the strong beat of wings ruffled her dark hair. She almost hadn't minded the stolen chips. "Where's Maman?" A lock of brown hair flopped into little Sahil's eyes. I smiled and patted the floor next to me. "Come and sit next to me. Don't be scared." My handsome grandson sank to his knees on the carpet. "I don't like stories, Daddy Ma." "This isn't a story, it's magic." I flattened the book on my lap, pleased when he peered closer. Alicia tottered over, shepherded by Echo. She pulled his ear. "Story!" The leopard nuzzled into her belly, his gentleness in stark contrast to his ferocity on the battlefield, and when she plopped herself down, he sat proudly beside her. "Now, watch carefully, children." I let them place their grubby hands on the page. Soon it would be empty. "This is magic." It had taken me until my teens to learn how to use my talents with accuracy, but now it came to me as easily as breathing. I closed my eyes and allowed my body to detach itself from my surroundings, just for a moment. The page deserved all my concentration. My breath slowed, and I aimed for a state of zen, like the quiet in a sleeping house at twilight. It took a fraction of a second to assign the creatures a purpose, to enthrall us all for a few minutes before freedom beckoned through the open window. Then I tapped 3 birds of different species. The tap wasn't a drumbeat, it was more like the tapping of a plumber checking pipes or a metalworker shaping his masterpiece. Placement was everything. Animation for me was like geometry. The page might be flat and without dimension, but the image in my mind's eye was 3-dimensional. It was biology and physics and chemistry. It wasn't paper, it was flesh. It wasn't paint, it was blood and cells. 1 tap to the crown of the bird's head, 1 tap to the tail feathers, a tap each to the bird's feet and talons. A sweep across the chest, and a great tit emerged. Not a boob, of course, but a bird. A bird made real by my magic. The 2 dimensions of the page became flesh and bone and soft feathers, a black head with a beautifully curved white chest and a sharp beak already singing its 2-syllable song. Little Sahil gawped, his mouth slack with wonder. His sister clapped in glee and let out a squeaky fart. More birdie! She lurched over to the catalogue of creatures and touched a peregrine falcon painted by her father in watercolours. For a moment, the lines of the page throbbed with life. The white face with its black tears and curved beak, the long pointed blue-grey wings, spotted belly and sharp talons. And I knew that my hunch had been true. This little girl showed promise far greater than I ever had at her tender age. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Excellent work, Rajika," said the leopard. "Wait until they see you animate creatures bigger than them." I laughed with sheer pride in my granddaughter, then focused to pull a goldfinch from the page with its vibrant red face and yellow wings. Its peaceful twittering filled the room as it spread its wings and looped from a tasselled lamp to the plush sofa and back again. There was no panic to its movements in the enclosed space, or panic at the prowling leopard, just a joyous soaring, its instincts momentarily suppressed as it entertained my grandchildren. The leopard let out a rumbling purr. The goldfish would make a tasty snack. Echo's hunter's instincts were wild and ever-present, but his loyalty to me always held him in check. I wagged my finger at him in warning. Then I dipped into my subconscious self again and located the geometrical points of a robin redbreast within the page. It emerged, fluttering and dazed, to sit in the palm of my hand and cocked its head in gratitude. Then it joined the great tit and the goldfinch in swooping around the living room. Sahil and Alicia chased after them, and their anxiety at their absent parents was entirely forgotten. Would this moment stay with them, or would it seem like a dream, or would it disappear into the black hole of childhood memories? I cursed as the goldfinch evacuated its bowels onto Rosalie's prize sofa. The baby gleefully squelched her hands in it. "Ugh," said the leopard in disgust. "There are moments like this when not having paws is an advantage. That's going to take some clean-up," says the leopard who regularly urinates indoors. I zipped the catalogue of creatures back into my rucksack and made it to the baby before she stuffed her fists in her mouth. "It's called marking my territory. It's science, not befuddlement." "If you say so." I ushered the birds out the open window with the baby on my hip, her feces hands in a vice-like grip. "Shoo! Live well." Alicia's cries at their departure filled my ears as I scrubbed her hands with soap at the kitchen sink and then mopped up the mess on the sofa. When I had finished, I knelt down to the children with a tired sigh. "It's time to go to bed. I'll tuck you in and we can have a little sing-along. Echo loves those." Sahil tugged on my hand. "Can we have more birds, Daddy-ma?" I shook my head. "I'll do it again for you soon, I promise." Echo's emerald eyes gleamed. "Let's hope Joshi doesn't find out about this, or he will think twice about allowing you to babysit again." "Some things are worth the risk. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if the children told Daddy about this. It might remind Joshi of the magic he's missing." I pinched the baby's cheeks. "Maybe my grandchildren will be the ones to coax him back into the other world. After all, the humdrum world hardly compares. Did you really not see what happened with the falcon?" Echo: "I think Alicia might be able to." I clutched my stomach as a mass of knots gathered and expanded there. The leopard crossed to my side in an instant. "Rajika, what's wrong?" "The Celestial Library's in trouble. I think someone slipped through its defences." The Custodian and the Celestial Library had an almost umbilical link. I could feel its call in my bones, a tugging, a wrenching, a churning. Something was very wrong. I set down Alicia, my anxiety spiking, and bit my lip, glancing at my grandchildren before opening a slipstream with the swirl of my hand. a movement made across the centuries by custodians before me, a passageway forged into the fabric of the universe to carry me to my destination, a skill loaned to me by the Celestial Library. What I took from the library, it would require back in some form, whether now or at a later date, but it was worth it. You'll keep Sahil and Alicia safe. I locked eyes with Echo's emerald ones with the seriousness of a judge. The leopard inclined his majestic head. Of course. My breath hitched in my chest. I knew he'd laid down his life for them. I reached for my rucksack as the slipstream thrummed next to me. My dormant maternal feelings stirred. Don't leave until Joshi is home. What if you need me? Said Echo. My familiar, my friend who had crossed unfamiliar terrain and choppy seas, leaving his ancestral home in India to follow me to London. I'll manage. My stomach clenched, and I resisted the urge to let him accompany me to the library. I needed him to stay with the children, whatever was in store for me. Wasn't that the hallmark of a mother? Someone who put herself last, even if she was left bruised. The leopard growled. The slipstream. It's the wrong colour. You're not going straight there. He was right. The custodian's passageway to the Celestial Library was made up of the darkest night, and only at the farthest reaches did the planets and stars beckon like a lighthouse. This one was a verdant green like the hills of Kerala. Green for the earth goddess I intended to visit, the one who had asked me to leave India in the first place, who had insisted my place was in London. Destiny called. I must see Gaia. I caressed his ears. Thank you, Echo, for all you have been to me and all you will be in the future. On a whim, I darted to kiss the children. Stay alive, said Echo. I nodded and stepped into the ether. Off-key musical notes met my ears, the leopard crooning the Bee Gees to the children in the family home before the slipstream closed behind me. The blood rushed into my ears, and a current of air yanked me forward, enveloping me in shades of green. I knew how this went. I couldn't lose my head. I breathed deeply, kept hold of my possessions, and surrendered myself to the forces of the universe. Soon enough, the slipstream would spit me out, usually intact, but sometimes with odd items, usually inanimate, we had picked up along the way. A pair of stockings, a fish finger sandwich, a first edition of A Wrinkle in Time. I emerged in the front garden of Gaia's ground floor flat. Her garden bloomed as if it was the height of summer, with pink begonias and dahlias, a meadow of gerbera daisies and hibiscus, bringing vitality and tropical whimsy to the South London Council estate. You wouldn't have thought the Earth Goddess would choose Tooting as her home. It was hardly an up-and-coming area, but she seemed to like it here, amongst strays and waifs in an ever-changing community. Her sunshine-yellow door stood ajar, as always. My cells throbbed with my connection to the Celestial Library. I gave a cursory knock and made my way inside. The mingled scent of curry powder and semolina filled my nostrils. Gaia? I headed towards the clanking in the kitchen, sweeping my gaze around her unremarkable kitchen. The stained oven gloves, the dishes piled in the sink, the magnolia walls and dusty ceiling lamp, the flour spilt on the counter, and a batch of freshly made laddus, Indian sweet balls, on the worktop. Gaia had once told me of her arduous search for an animator, a peculiar like me who could pull creatures from the page. All her worries had fallen away once she had met me. She worked well with druids before. We understood the earth and had a deep sense of magic within it. We respected its creatures and nursed a spirituality that some in the modern world had long forgotten. I'd fallen hook, line, and sinker for her words. Of course, I'd come to England at her request. I'd never asked for more knowledge of her plan. It was dangerous to get pushy with a goddess. I had never demanded anything. Until now. Rajika, a voice behind me, gentle as a lapping tide against the shore. Just in time to have a cup of chai with me. I spun to face her. I'm only here for a moment. The earth goddess, clad in the sari, the colour of clementines, glowed with health. She was an Indian woman of roughly my age, with otherworldly eyes in which I sometimes spotted the turn of the earth, the crumbling of ice, and the bubbling of fiery lava. Today, her hands had been adorned with henna, and she held a basket of laundry in her arms. I flushed at its haul of bright, lacy thongs. I was more of a functional knickers type of woman, but to each their own. Gaia's smile had the warmth of the sun. Oh, don't mind me. I have a date with death tonight. I like to make an effort. Her cherubic face grew sombre as she took in my armour and the determined set of my jaw. What's the matter, child? My heart thudded in my chest. I've always wondered why you brought me here, but I think I know now. Gaia's sari rustled as she set down the basket. When she straightened, all trace of the homemaker had fled. Here was a goddess, prone to machinations and wrath, capable of both taking down armies and great love. Speak. Her voice gonged in my head, a command. My voice caught in my throat. I thought you brought me here to shape London's otherworld. Gaia's brown eyes gleamed. And you have. There will never be as celebrated a custodian of the Celestial Library as you. My chest tightened. It wasn't just about me, was it? It was about my family. I think Alicia can animate. That's why you've shown such interest in Joshy's family since she was born. When we met, this juncture seemed years away, but time always passes in a blink, said Gaia. It's one of the best and worst things about it. The goddess's clever eye searched my face. I had an inkling your descendants would make their mark on the world, yes. Your granddaughter will make you proud. My gut churned. Is she the girl in the prophecy? Gaia shrugged. Prophecies are tricky things. Stagnant, sticky, prone to misinterpretation. Is Alicia the eternal girl? She could be. The goddess's tone softened. But many moons will pass before that matter is settled. Moons that you will not see. In any case, I find it's best to focus on what we can do in the present. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Promise me, Gaia, if you ever cared for me, promise me you will watch over my family. If they turn their backs on the other world, you'll have to find the right moment to guide them. Without magic, their true potential will be stifled. I don't want that for them. Gaia's eyes softened. I am a patient woman. I will watch over your family, Druid. You have my word. They are as important to me as they are to you, perhaps more so. My voice quivered. The library is calling. Remember your promise, Druid. Protect the Book of Names at all costs, said the goddess. You must preserve it, but keep it out of the reach of those who most covet it. A wave of panic rose in me. It would be so much easier to destroy the wretched thing. The goddess cupped my cheek with her weathered hand, and a calm descended over me. What did you do? I asked. She gave a sad smile. I channeled the aloe vera plant and took away your future pain. Would you like a laddu to go? I nodded. She'd always been a feeder, and sugar made every situation better. Gaia stuffed the laddu in my mouth. Farewell, Rajika. I swallowed the sweet, savouring the hints of nuttiness, the cardamom and the raisins. Then I swirled my hand to open the slipstream. Farewell, goddess, I said. This time the passage was black and dense, and the distant stars a mere flicker. I stepped into it and surged towards the celestial library, with the goddess's whispered prayers at my back. By the time I arrived, I felt the library's anguish in a hot rush of my blood. Its anguish at the enemy being within its walls when it had worked so hard to keep them out. The limited entry portals, the trials, the library's ability to judge the nature of each person within its hallowed halls. None of it had been enough this time. The great hall, with its marble pillars and paintings of angels and cherubs on the ceiling, was already overrun with dozens of dark elves. "Your place is here, Rajika," said the library, "and yet you ignored my call." "You're my home and future," I said, "but I can't forget my family. I'm here now." "Let us hope it's enough," said the library. The sight of the small, knobbly creatures with their grey skin, billowing ears and rudimentary weapons sent shivers down my spine. I secured my rucksack, drew out a pair of iron-edged daggers, strapped to my calves, and ran into the fray. A trio of sister witches, Lavinia, Isadora, and Chandra, fought admirably, aided by the library itself, which shifted squares of floor, introduced new terrains, and crushed elves with falling debris. London witches were a particularly odd sort. Lavinia, a fellow member of the Sorcerer's Senate, executed a thrilling gymnastics landing from her umbrella, which doubled as a broomstick and weapon, breaking apart a compact trio of machete-carrying elves with ease. She poked the elves in the bum with a spike at the end of her umbrella, causing them to collapse, and muttered a spell to enshrine them within the concrete floor. Channeling my connection to the library, I directed a stream of pulp fiction novels at a group of elves with the speed of missiles. "It's a shame to waste good stories," said the library. I snorted. "All rules go out the window in battles, as you well know." Lavinia threw me a glance. "Took you long enough." I had to take a brief detour. 2 assailants came at me, and I ran towards them, falling to my knees before sinking my daggers into their bellies, left and right. Their cries haunted me, but I blocked them out. This was part of my job. The Custodian was a bookish librarian and a warrior. "Was it the Wildwoods portal that was compromised?" Lavinia gave me a grim nod. "Yes. Please tell me your son painted you the snakes." I frowned. "Not quite. The iron-lace weapons will have to do." I knifed an elf in the thigh, pulled out the dagger, and booted his arse out of my way. Lavinia rolled her eyes. "Can men ever do as they are told?" Her helmet of silver curls shook as an aging elf clubbed her shoulder. Her spells spiraled him across the room. "I am being overrun, Rajika. Work faster," said the library. "Only those with pure intentions belong within my walls. The elf queen roams the inner halls, seeking." Her laughter unhindered. Even as we spoke, bodies arrived through the portal into the great hall. More elves, hundreds of them spinning like ants across the room. But reinforcements too. Witches and their rat familiars, werewolves, the prime sorcerer, a young vampire called Orpheus with ambitions to serve on the Sorcerer's Senate. His fists raised, and as quick as Muhammad Ali. "Hold on," I said to the library. I tossed my rucksack in front of me and scrambled for the catalogue of creatures, flipping to the page of a rhinoceros, and brought the creature to life with the sole purpose of decimating the elves in the great hall. It emerged, tough grey skin, head lowered, gleaming horn, the floor shuddering with its weight as it charged. My breath came in pants. Animating a large creature took its toll, even on someone as experienced as me. "We have to close the portal, Lavinia." The witch Chandra loomed into my vision and hopped on her umbrella. "Leave that to me." Lavinia grimaced. "Get to the inner sanctum, Rajika. We've got the great hall covered, but the elf queen slipped through." "Clear my path," I said to the library. I grabbed the catalogue of creatures and wove through the battlefield, sticking it to anyone in my path with the ferocity the library approved of. Like the books within it, the library had both light and dark in its soul. My heart leapt as my sleek black stallion Nightfall cantered to a standstill at the edge of the fray. I swung onto his bare back and gripped his mane, leaving the cries of elves and the trumpeting, snorting rhino behind me. The horse galloped into the bowels of the Celestial Library, instinctively knowing where trouble brewed. "Hurry! The Great Hall isn't where the real treasures are hidden," said the library. My dark hair flew out behind me as Nightfall raced past endless shelves groaning under the weight of books, past hidden doorways, my living quarters, laboratories and secret gardens, past the tea room and the room that held sands of lost deserts. All the while, the planet spun above us. Queasiness overcame me. The Elf Queen poked around things she had no business seeing. If she touched my first edition of Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, I would take out all my female rage on her. Her attacks against the other world were fueled by grievances. She demanded more resources and better jobs for the elven community, preferential admittance into Wildwood's School of the Wondrous, and a seat on the Sorcerer's Senate for herself. I knew what it was like to be an outsider. I could have helped her. But Mariel Nahorn wasn't a team player. She was a taker. She had come for the one item in the Celestial Library that never left these walls, the Book of Names, whose location was only known by the Custodian. Somehow, Wildwoods had been her passage here, but I didn't have time to worry about that now. The Elf Queen was a formidable warrior, agile and cunning, speedy and strong. She had learned elven magic from her father, enabling her to cast spells, and had inherited a peculiar hold over animals. Her ruthless streak meant she was difficult to beat. The only weak spot the Sorcerer's Senate had been able to discern was a fear of snakes after a run-in with a minor water goddess. I didn't have new paintings from Joshi, but I had no reason to fear. Nightfall galloped, and I had the whole might of the Celestial Library behind me. "Yes, you do," said the library in my thoughts, "and maybe it will be enough. A building full of knowledge, tricks, and hidden gems is nearly always enough." I just needed to make it to the Book of Names before her, a book that resided in the library amongst the stars, precisely so no mortal could wield it, a book that revealed the true names of the gods, allowing mortals power over them, and made its user peerless. Even the Prime Sorcerer wouldn't be able to bring her down. "The Book of Names, the Book of Names, the Book of Names," said the library. I sensed the library's panic and leaned into Nightfall, squeezing my knees together and tilting my pelvis just so, like we had practiced 100 times over. He stretched out his tufty black wings, launching into the air so his hooves could no longer be heard on the gleaming floors of the Celestial Library, masking our approach from the Elf Queen. My limbs tingled, and I sent a prayer to Ganesha to hold the enemy at bay long enough for me to complete my task. All hidden pockets remain closed, but the Elf Queen rattles them. Her frustration grows, said the library in my thoughts. There were many ways to open hidden doors in the Celestial Library. One could be opened with a pinky print, but only if the nail was neatly filed. Another needed an iron key dotted with mountain dew, a tough ask amongst the stars, or a rabbit's paw pressed to them, as long as the rabbit in life had been known as Peter. My favourite room opened with a Gaelic word whispered 3 times in a row. The room that held the Book of Names, however, required a rigmarole that only those most attuned to the library's thinking, the custodian, an astrophysicist or astrologer, would be able to replicate. It demanded a ricocheting between geometrical points on a map, because if you looked really closely, the hidden doors of the Celestial Library had been mapped on the solar system itself. But this failsafe wasn't enough, not for an artifact as important as the Book of Names. I had another trick up my sleeve. As every magical person knew, there were fewer things stronger than a blood bond. "Hurry, Rajika, hurry, and you will be the most celebrated custodian of all time," said the library. "Hurry, and the world will stand a chance against the darkness, even on the most treacherous, starless night." We drew our path. Nightfall's hind hooves touched each point of a pentagram. The arched green door, the crumbling door, the one splashed like a Jackson Pollock, the stumpy narrow one with the children's handprint, and lastly, the one painted the colour of a summer sky with a cloudy, round doorknob. The library shuddered, and the winged horse surged forward to reach the door at the centre of the pentagram. The library had made this door an unobtrusive, weathered timber, so those looking for it might discount it. But a baby's crib against a backdrop of clouds had been carved into the wood. "Very good. The clouds signify the heavens, and the crib signifies the day the gods were first named," I said to the library. "I like your inside jokes. It's one reason I've not felt alone up here." "There are not many that recognise the humour of libraries," said the library. "Let's hope you survive the night." I slid off Nightfall's back and checked we were alone. Then I pressed my palms against the cool wood. At my nod, Nightfall whinnied. The door clicked open. I left him on guard outside and stepped inside a room no bigger than a camper van, with a simple hearth and a chair upon which the Book of Names waited for its next reader. But the vast expanse of glass panes instead of slit windows caught my attention. The view made my jaw slacken. Pools of shadow and reflected light. Cratered planets and frothy seas, dwarf planets in orbit, black holes, distant galaxies, and a comet a mile wide. "She nears," said the library. I tore my eyes away from the view and snatched up the Book of Names, my heart pummeling in my chest. The book fitted into the palm of my hand, a notebook made from cowhide. Bound together with a black ribbon, its deteriorating unlined pages were covered in sapphire ink. It whispered to me to take its power for my own. "Don't listen to it, Rajika," said the library. "Let its words float over you like a dream." Could something so small be so dangerous? The whispers enticed like the notes on a musical score. I slammed the Book of Names shut, unsheathed a dagger from my calf, and fixed my thoughts on my granddaughter. Slicing my palm, I drenched the book ribbon with my blood. With the library's words imprinted in my head, words borrowed from the reams of books within its walls, I enchanted the verse that would preserve the Book of Names for my granddaughter and no one else. Words from a language I didn't understand, words that fizzed on my tongue and left my mouth parched. I jiggled in anxiety, waiting for something, anything. "Patience, Rajika," said the library. A cushion of air lifted the book from my hands and enveloped it, rendering it invisible. It slipped up the chimney, out into the stars, anchored only by the blood-soaked book ribbon to the library. I gawped for a moment, then resheathed my dagger and reached into my leathers for my dead husband's handkerchief to bind the wound on my palm. "The Elf Queen's rage grows," said the library. "Perhaps you should show her the self-help section." I grimaced and hurried out of the secret room, closing the door behind me before leaping onto Nightfall's back. "Come on, old friend. I have a reckoning with the Elf Queen." Nightfall galloped into the bowels of the library, everything blurred in the midst of a battle. Distant sounds of clashes and shrieks became background noise to my own survival instincts. The Elf Queen waited in an aisle full of encyclopedias, her head bowed in eerie repose, sword already drawn. She lifted her head when we were almost upon her, with arrogant pride in her prowess. Her skin had a silver translucent quality, unlike the dull grey of the other elves I had come across. At my command, Nightfall reared to a stop. I looked down my nose at Muriel from my position on horseback. "Leave this place, Elf Queen. You are not welcome here." Muriel's blue eyes held a hint of madness. "Some say the heart of the other world is Wildwood's school of the wondrous, but you and I know they are mistaken, don't we, Rajika? The heart of the other world is the celestial library." Her gleaming smile fell from her face, leaving only malice. "You can't tell me where I belong. Where is the Book of Names?" "Do you think I know all the secrets of this place?" I pretended to mull it over. "Records state it was loaned out by a previous custodian." "Liar," she breathed. Nightfall snorted with worry. I dismounted. Each time Muriel and I had met, I'd held back from using my full strength. Killing the Elf Queen would destabilise the other world and lead to repercussions. But she had invaded my turf. It was always going to come to this. I raised my hand, and the library pelted her with books. That was the thing about encyclopedias. They were incredibly heavy. Oh, pitiful books risking bent spines, rips and dog-eared pages to bring this elf to heel, said the library. Muriel dodged the projectiles with the speed and agility for which her kind was known, her bony shoulders turning in the air as she landed cleanly, save for a slight wobble caused by a gash I'd left during our last battle. Her armour was simpler than mine, built not to restrict her speed, with only cursory protection of her vital organs. Her leather boots were light against the floor. "You need more room," said the library. "Let me give it to you." I raised both hands and pushed them out with force. The aisles shifted backwards, creating an arena in which we could battle. My hand throbbed where I'd slashed it with my blade. I grabbed my catalogue of creatures from my rucksack, flicking the pages as I animated an army of scorpions and assassin bugs to encircle her. They surged across the floor to the Elf Queen, but she crouched down to them with a whisper, and they parted like a sea. She laughed, her madness unleashed, slashing at them, stamping on them, fearless enough to cut the stinger off one poor creature and take a bite. "Buy me time," I said to the library as I tried again. Blood streamed from my nose as I attempted to animate a dragon. Surely a mythical beast would slay the woman. My attempt ended in failure that I had not seen the likes of since my time as custodian. My stomach knotted. Why now, when I was facing such a difficult adversary? "Some things are written," said the library sadly. "The Elf Queen is like you in many ways, alone, powerful, angry, and with an affinity for animals and a purpose. If the world were reversed, you could be her, and she could be you." All the while, the library contained Muriel, building walls with books and stone, disorienting her with shifting perspectives of the stars and planets, sprouting trees and seas of paper. But the Elf Queen persevered. She pushed and slashed with her sword. She cast elven spells, her father's teaching still etched in her mind. She freed herself with a shout, spitting in disgust, her voice pitched in outrage. "Why won't you tell me what I need to know?" "Because no one deserves to wield that much power." I cast aside my catalogue of creatures and ran towards her at full pelt. The library, ever ready to dip into its magical box of tricks, ferried me a sword on 2 flapping books of poetry. I leapt to catch it. Our swords met in a clash of steel that rang in my ears. My chest tightened and blood rushed to my ears as the movements became a dance. Lunge, twist, parry, feint, attack. Again and again. Years of yoga increased my suppleness and breathing proficiency to lend strength to my sword skills, but a woman in her mid-50s couldn't keep this up for long, not without needing a lie-down or an oxygen mask. The library helped, shifting the arena around us, making it hilly or dropping sudden craters into the floor, growing vines and hedges before turning them to ash. Its tricks were familiar to me, and the synergy between us made up for the speed I lacked against the Elf Queen. Mariel cackled wildly as she fought, and not for the first time I questioned whether she was free or unhinged. When my muscles ached and my feet slowed, doubt crept in. "Endure," said the library, which had itself endured since the dawn of time. Had minutes passed, or hours? Could I hold out until the witches arrived, until we could capture Mariel and put her on trial, until the Sorcerer's Senate improved elven lives and took the sting out of future Mariels? "You are too well matched for one of you to fall without great treachery or sacrifice," said the library. Nightfall cantered forward, sensing my need. The Elf Queen's glacial eyes jerked away from me. Bony shoulders, armoured plating, and matted blonde hair flew in the direction of the horse. Understanding her intention too late, I gasped. Lunging sideways to protect Nightfall, my sword raised to defend him. I couldn't bear my creatures to be hurt. "No," said the library, though it made not one jot of difference. The Elf Queen sank her sword through a chink in my breastplate, inches from my heart. A cry of shock ripped from my throat. I dropped my sword and sank to the floor, my limbs folded unnaturally underneath me. Relief swept through me that Nightfall was safe. Thank goodness he was safe. My body wouldn't respond to my brain asking it to move, as if there was somehow a disconnect. Why was the Elf Queen staring at me? I pulled off my breastplate and gazed at my wound in surprise, watching my leathers become wet with blood. There was no pain, only bewilderment and a well of sadness. How had I let it come to this? I grasped for a dagger and threw it at the Elf Queen in retaliation, but my arm, once so strong, wavered, and the dagger clattered to the floor. It's funny what goes through your head when you are dying. I'd imagined my death many times over. I thought I would worry about matching underwear, overgrown eyebrows, or rogue chin hair. I thought I'd worry about who would check up on my creatures once I was gone. Instead, all I could think was that even as a child, my aim had never been poor. How I dearly wanted to stick my dagger between Mariel's shoulder blades. How I wanted to feel the monsoon rains on my skin and have Joshi draw for me one last time. Have a chance to tell him everything would be all right. I was already an afterthought to the Elf Queen. Mariel's tinkling laugh met my ears as she walked away, cleaning my blood from her sword. "They will write of this day for millennia, how the Elf Queen fell the 78th Custodian. I will find the Book of Names, and the other world will be made anew." The library's thoughts intertwined with mine, and its voice was sorrowful. "The great hall has been cleared, and the witches near with their incontinent rat army. Take solace, Rajika. The Elf Queen won't find the book, neither will she escape." For all her affinity for animals, Mariel hadn't once considered that Nightfall was the key, that he knew as much as I did. for all her strategic win tonight, making it as far as the celestial library with her army, the Elf Queen was blind to what stood right before her eyes. It comforted me that I had thwarted her goal. Neither the Elf Queen nor the ensuing custodians would find the Book of Names. I had kept my promise to Gaia. The book was entombed amongst the stars until Alicia discovered it. Nightfall trotted over and nosed my limp body, whinnying pitifully. My breath came in rasps. You can't leave the library, old friend. Not until the day my granddaughter retrieves the book. You must lead her there. Her blood is the key, do you understand? His eyes rolled sideways to look at me as understanding passed between us. Let me see you fly once more, I whispered. Nightfall stood and bowed. Then his magnificent wings unfolded from his flank, plumes of black feathers that caressed me. Was that in my mind? And he launched into the air against a ceiling of dense stars and swirling planets. He landed between the aisles of books and disappeared from sight. You're not alone, said the library. It pushed a small, mossy mound out of the ground to cradle me. Shall I read to you? No, I need to think. My chest rattled and blood bubbled up from the wound where the Elf Queen's strike had found flesh. But I didn't feel any pain. Gaia's love for me had seen to that. It wasn't a bad way to go, surrounded by books, amongst the stars, with the aftertaste of lodu in my mouth to soften the iron taste of blood. Thank you for the time we have spent together, said the library. I had no regrets. It had been a good life. The custodian's death was rarely an easy one, but almost always a worthwhile one. Soon there would be another to take up my mantle. My body cooled. As the memories of my life flitted like a slideshow through my mind, I remembered it all. My mother's hand on my head, my father teaching my brother Rajiv and me mathematics, even though some in my village said that I should be in the fields with the other girls. The day my husband proposed, and the day he died. Joshi's birth, and the first time he held a crayon. The creatures that, at my touch, had leapt from the blank page into the world. An Echo, always Echo, my leopard by my side. I missed him fiercely, longing for one last touch of his fur, one last battle, one last song. Then somehow Echo was there, reaching me long before a column of others in the distance. A clank, and he shook off his armour. Then mercifully he was by my side, his golden fur slick with sweat, a deep gash in the corner of his eye. You didn't have to do this alone. His purr soothed me with its vibration and loving timbre. My breath rasped, the words crawling out, reluctant, sucked of life force. The children are safe. He inclined his beautiful head. Joshi was wearing a Duran Duran t-shirt. The leopard's eyes flickered, and I imagined my son's false belief that I had put work before family again. A parent can never meet their child's expectations. But one day he would understand. Echo nestled against me, his eye gash oozing blood. I opened my mouth to comfort him, but this time the words didn't come. He was so far from his kind. I hoped one day he found someone to love as much as me. The leopard understood my silence. He licked me like I was his cub, protecting me in my moment of passing. His roar was a serenade of love as my eyelids fluttered shut. When they collected my body and my ashes were scattered in the winds, My son's cries reached me, but also the lash of his anger. I knew with the final passing glimpses of my consciousness, a heady mix of cumulus clouds, the spinning earth, and the voices of my loved ones, that Joshi, broken in his grief for me, would blame the other world for my death. I knew he would bind Sahil and Alicia's magic. I also knew that one day the Earth Goddess would come. Thank you for listening to The Magical Grandmother, prequel short story to the Druid Heir series, written and performed by NZ Nasser.